مساكم الله بالخير طلبتنا الأعزاء طلبة مرحلة ثالثة. ونتمنى لكم أن تكونون بخير وصحة وسلامة إن شاء الله. Technically we have finished our last topic واللي بالحقيقة كان very important topic in your pharmacology lectures اللي هو autonomic nerve أو اللي هو dynamics and pharmacokinetics. And today we are going to talk about another important topic in pharmacology, or autonomic nervous system. Why this project or topic is very important? Because there's a wide range of drugs that act on autonomic nervous system. These drugs called autonomic drugs. So just before starting our lecture today, I'm going to remind you about the biological divisions or part of your nervous system. So nervous system consists of two main compartments. The central part, which is called the CNS, or the central nervous system, and this part represents the brain and the spinal cord, الدماغ والحبل الشوكي. However, the peripheral part called the PNS, or the peripheral nervous system, and this part represents the nerve or the nervous tissues that are located outside of the central nervous system. Peripheral nervous system, or the PNS, can be divided into two main divisions, the sensory part and the motor part. The sensory part, أو الجزء الحسي, it represents the nerve impulse that transmit, or the nerve tissues that transmit the impulse or the signal from the different body parts to the central nervous system. However, the motor division represents the neurons or the nervous tissues that transmit the impulse or the nerve signal from the nervous system to the different body parts. Motor division can be again divided into two main divisions. The somatic part, الجزء الحركي أو الجزء الجسدي, or the part of the motor division that you can move, you can control, you can change, and you can modulate. Say, for example, the skeletal muscle in your leg, in your head, in your brain, and in your different body parts. However, the other part of the motor division that you cannot move, you cannot control, called the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system represents wide range of muscles or smooth muscles in your body you cannot move. Say, for example, the smooth muscle in your gastrointestinal tract, in your renal system, in your blood vessels, or even the cardiac muscle in your heart. Autonomic nervous system can be divided into two main divisions, sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. And this kind of classification take into consideration the type of the neuron and the type of the neurotransmitter. And we are going to talk about these details in these part or divisions in much more details in the next few slides. So this is the autonomic nervous system, and you can see autonomic nervous system consists of two main neurons. These neurons called and these neurons connected by a specific ganglia called autonomic ganglia. So the neuron that is located before autonomic ganglia called a preganglionic neuron, the neuron that locates before autonomic ganglia. However, the neuron cell that is located after autonomic ganglia called postganglionic neuron, which is the neuron cell that is located after the autonomic ganglia. In autonomic ganglia, there is a specific neurotransmitter secreted from the nerve ending of the preganglionic neurons to bind to a specific receptor in the head of the postganglionic neuron. And again, we have another neurotransmitter secreted from the nerve ending of the postganglionic neuron to bind on the effector organ. And this binding can change and can modulate the function of this organ. As I mentioned previously, somatic neurons is the neurons that control specific organs, which is mainly skeletal muscle, and you can control, you can move this part of your body. Somatic neurons or somatic motor neurons characterized by the absence of the ganglionic of the autonomic ganglion. So there is no autonomic ganglion in the somatic neuron. And the neurotransmitter secreted here is mainly acetylcholine. This is in the somatic part. However, in the autonomic motor neuron, there's slightly, it is slightly different from the somatic neuron. There's autonomic ganglia here, okay? And in the sympathetic preganglionic part, the sympathetic preganglionic neuron secretes acetylcholine, and the postganglionic neuron secrete norepinephrine. Another characteristic feature of the sympathetic system is the preganglionic neuron is very short. So the autonomic ganglia located in the central nervous system, mainly in the brain or in the spinal cord. So this is for the sympathetic nervous system. What about the parasympathetic nervous system? There are two main differences between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. In the parasympathetic nervous system, autonomic ganglia, there's a secretion of acetylcholine. However, in the postganglionic part, the postganglionic neuron secrete acetylcholine instead of norepinephrine. We have an exception, which is adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla behave like a sympathetic system. So it is innervated by neuron cells that release or secrete acetylcholine. However, the stimulation of the autonomic medulla of the adrenal medulla by acetylcholine can cause release of norepinephrine. However, releasing of norepinephrine take place directly to the bloodstream, and spreading of the norepinephrine can increase or can affect or can change the function of many different organs, such as blood vessels. Most of your body organs innervated by both sympathetic and parasympathetic system. And there's kind of balance between the effect of the sympathetic and the effect of the parasympathetic nervous system of on each organ. Say, for example, here, your trachea and the bronchioles innervated by both sympathetic, which is represented here by the red color, and the parasympathetic, which is represented here by the blue color. And you can see stimulating the sympathetic system can dilate your trachea and the bronchioles. However, stimulating of the parasympathetic system can constrict your trachea and also can increase the secretion of mucus. Another example here, your eye, some activation of the sympathetic activity can increase contraction of the iris radial muscle, causing pupil dilates. However, stimulating or activating parasympathetic system can cause contraction of the iris sphincter muscle, causing pupil to contract. Again, in genitalia of the male, stimulation of the sympathetic system can stimulate ejaculation. However, stimulation of the parasympathetic system can stimulate erection. On your heart, which is very important part of your body, activation of the sympathetic system can increase heart rate, can increase the force of contraction of your cardiac muscle. However, activation of the parasympathetic system can decrease the heart rate the rate in which your heart beats, and also decrease the force of contraction or decrease the contractility of your cardiac muscle. So what are the function of both sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system? In general, the function of the sympathetic nervous system is during stressful situation, and that's why this system called fight or flight system, or the system responsible for fight or flight response. So in a situation such as the trauma, such as hypoglycemia, such as when you get angry, when you get upset, your sympathetic system, or even during exercise, your sympathetic system is activated, so that this system make your body ready to any kind of extreme work or extreme emotional situation or extreme physical activity. However, the parasympathetic nervous system has another function. So this system works during the resting status to maintain your body homeostasis or homeostasis, sorry. And that's why parasympathetic division usually called or usually used during the situation of rest and digest. And you can see here, as I said previously, on your heart, your blood, your sympathetic nervous system increase your heart rate and force of contraction, and the parasympathetic nervous system decreases both your heart rate and your force, or your contractility in your cardiac muscle. Honestly, there is no absolute separation between the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. So these two different systems work cooperatively or together to control or to regulate your body function. So say, for example, when your blood pressure falls for any reason, that falling in blood pressure will activate specific kind of receptor available in your heart. This receptor called baroreceptor. Baroreceptor activation of this kind of receptor will activate another part in your brain called the cardiac or the cardiovascular center. This center again activate the autonomic nervous system or the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, and activation of the sympathetic part of your autonomic nervous system again will increase the heart rate and the blood pressure, and in this situation it will counteract, it will increase the blood pressure to gate or to make your blood pressure reaches to the normal level. So in summary, there is kind of collaboration between the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. As I mentioned previously, autonomic nervous system or most organs in your body are innervated by the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. So every single organs, or in general, every single organs has got two different innervations, sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation. And this is in general. However, there are few exceptions. So there are few organs that receive only just sympathetic innervation. And these include adrenal medulla, kidney, and even the sweat gland. So here we need to answer about very important questions. How your cells communicate with each other, or is it possible to your cells to talk with each other, or is it possible to your cells to regulate the function of each other? The question definitely yeah. So by which way your cells or your different body cells can communicate with each other and can regulate the function of each other. So in general, or one of the most important way by which cells transmit signals to each other by sending different hormones. So your endocrine system أو جهاز الغدد الصمام by which cells communicate or regulate the function of each other by sending different kind of hormones. So we have insulin, we have a wide range of hormones. These hormones are chemical substances secreted in a very tiny concentration to regulate the function of different organs inside your body. The other part or the other way by which your cells can communicate with each other is by sending nerve impulse between different organs. And here we are talking about the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So these two systems control your body by sending nerve impulses. These impulses or signals called action potential. The potential which is capable of activating a specific physiological function. So here we have nerve cells, and the nerve cells ended up with a gap here called the cleft or the synapse. And the synapse, there's a release of a neurotransmitter, the transmitter binding to the effector organ or to the postganglionic part. And this kind of binding can cause changing or modulating a function of that organ. However, there are another way by which cells can communicate with each other than endocrine or sending of electrical impulse, which is by the direct contact. By this function, cells sometimes can release local mediators or local substances. And the difference between this mechanism and the endocrine signaling hormones released by specific cells and they are sent by bloodstream to different parts of the body. However, by direct contact, a cell can release a specific mediator locally in the same tissue. And this mediator can affect the function of another cell. And we are going to talk about this project, or sorry, about this topic in stage 4, inshallah. So one important mechanism, as I mentioned previously, by which cells communicate with each other by sending or by generating or by releasing a specific neurotransmitter or hormones, and these chemicals are bind to a specific receptor, because most of the neurotransmitter, hormones, and even local mediators are too hydrophilic, so they cannot penetrate the lipid bilayer of the cell membrane. So these chemicals, again, whether this chemical is a neurotransmitter, hormone, or local mediator, bind to a specific receptor, and binding of this substance to its receptor can activate specific intracellular events or response. So again, there's wide range of neurotransmitter, and there are more than 50 neurotransmitter available in the nervous system. However, the most important neurotransmitter are norepinephrine, acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, histamine, glutamine, and gamma aminobutyric acid. This is summary of what we talked about previously. And as I mentioned previously, somatic system, there is no autonomic ganglia. And in somatic system, you can't control the movement or the motion of this organ because the effector organ mostly here skeletal muscle. However, in the autonomic nervous system, there's two main divisions, either sympathetic or parasympathetic division. And in each part, there's autonomic ganglia, and there is a pre-ganglionic neuron and post-ganglionic neuron. And the neurotransmitter releases at pre-ganglionic neuron is acetylcholine for both sympathetic and parasympathetic. So what is the differences, or what are the differences between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system? There are two main differences, as I mentioned previously. The neurotransmitter that released in post-ganglionic part in the sympathetic division is norepinephrine, but the neurotransmitter that released in the post-ganglionic part of the parasympathetic system is acetylcholine. Another difference, the pre-ganglionic neuron in the sympathetic system is very short, that most of or all ganglionic autonomic ganglia located in the central nervous system. However, autonomic ganglia in the parasympathetic system is very long, so that the most of the autonomic ganglia located outside of the central nervous system. And as we mentioned previously, there's an exception, which is adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla behave like autonomic or sympathetic system. It is innervated by sympathetic neurons that release acetylcholine. However, stimulating of adrenal medulla can increase the adrenal medulla activity by secreting epinephrine directly to the bloodstream and affecting so many organs in the human body. Acetylcholine is one of the most important neurotransmitter or transmitters available in the central nervous system. And if the transmission is mediated by acetylcholine, the neuron is termed cholinergic. So we have cholinergic neurons, the neurons that mediated or transmit, the transmission is mediated by acetylcholine. And again, as we mentioned previously, acetylcholine mediated transmission in autonomic ganglia in both sympathetic and parasympathetic system. Also, it is available on the effector organ on the parasympathetic system. And finally, acetylcholine used or exploited to transmit the nerve impulse in the somatic nervous system. The other neurotransmitter, which is very important, is norepinephrine and epinephrine. And when norepinephrine and epinephrine are the neurotransmitter, the neuron or the fiber is called adrenergic. So we have adrenergic and we have cholinergic neurons. Neurons that use norepinephrine and epinephrine called adrenergic neurons. However, neurons or fibers that use acetylcholine as neurotransmitter called cholinergic neurons. So On the effector organs, there is a neurotransmitter, and binding of this neurotransmitter on the effector organ can be taken place using three main mechanisms. The first mechanism, when the neurotransmitter binds on its receptor, and the receptor available on that kind of ion channels. So binding of the neurotransmitter on its receptor can change ion permeability, causing, say for example, calcium influx, potassium efflux, movement of the calcium from the intracellular to the extracellular part, or say for example, movement of potassium from the intracellular part to the extracellular part. Again, it depends on the kind of the innervation and kind of the receptor and kind of activation, whether it is activation or inactivation. And this part of receptor called ionotropic receptor. So what do we mean by ionotropic receptor? Ionotropic receptor, the receptor in which the receptor located or bind to ion channel, and activating of this receptor can change the permeability of this channel to specific ions or cations such as calcium, sodium, potassium, etc. Sometimes the neurotransmitter bind to another receptor, and binding of the neurotransmitter to this receptor can activate another receptor, and activating of this receptor can cause activation of a specific neurotransmitter, and this kind of receptor called metalloporic receptor. And in this kind of receptor, the neurotransmitter bind to a specific receptor, and that will cause activating of second messenger. And here we have two main second messenger, either adenylyl cyclase that cause changing in cyclic AMP activity, or the other type of a neuro or second messenger is inositol triphosphate. And activating of these second messengers can cause intracellular events and can change the function of these cells. So it can cause, for example, contraction, relaxation of these tissues, can increase or inhibit releasing of specific hormones and extra. Thank you for your listening. And again, I would like, or I really hope to write down every single important note we have mentioned in this lecture today. If you have any inquiry, if you have any question, if you feel you need to find out or you know something in my lecture today, all you need to do is just to write down a note in the our classroom in Pharmacology 1 classroom available on Google Classroom, and I'm going to reply your inquiry as soon as possible. Thank you for your listening, and I hope I can see you inshallah soon.